This holiday season, step aboard a Seattle tradition, the Argosy Cruises Christmas Ship Festival. Take in the holiday magic on the official Christmas ship, the Spirit of Seattle, adorned in hundreds of sparkling lights as she brings festive cheer to waterfront communities across Puget Sound. Enjoy live onboard caroling from local choirs, holiday-inspired drinks, and of course, Santa himself. With every ticket, Argosy donates to the Seattle Times Fund for Those in Need, supporting several local charities. Create memories that sparkle. Visit argosycruises.com and book your Christmas ship cruise today. Washington Wild is dedicated to protecting the wild lands and waters that make Washington State such an incredible place to live, explore, and thrive. From safeguarding clean drinking water to defending iconic outdoor destinations, Washington Wild brings together local voices to protect our natural heritage. Investing in visible impact close to home creates healthier ecosystems, stronger outdoor recreation, and a future where wild places remain truly wild for everyone. Learn how you can take action at wawild.org. This is CityCast Seattle. I'm Jane C. Hu, and here's what Seattle's talking about. Today on CityCast Seattle, federal policy changes that mean big cuts to local homelessness programs, shakeups in city and county government, and what is Seattle nice? But first, Amazon's sending out settlement refunds to some Prime members after an FTC lawsuit alleged that they enrolled millions of customers in Amazon Prime without their consent, and they made it hard for them to cancel. The maximum payout is $51 per person. Erica C. Barnett, founder of the news site PubliCola, how would you spend $51 right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess I would buy a carton of eggs. I don't know.
Just one carton.
I would buy like half a meal at a Seattle restaurant. $51 doesn't go as far as it used to.
Mm-hmm. Truly, truly. What about you, creative producer Sam J. Leeds? How would you spend $51 right now?
My latest obsession right now is, instead of a sad lamp, buying a lava lamp and just having that running in the background. So I think I would buy lava lamps for all of my friends. Just be like a lava lamp palooza situation.
Wait, can you get a lava lamp for $51?
You can get more than one lava lamp for $51. Really? Yeah, they're going like for fairly cheap on eBay.
Okay, well, Sam's going to buy me a lava lamp with their $51.
Perfect.
Great. Well, so there's some more federal news that puts billions of dollars on the line nationally and millions locally. So last week, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development made big changes to how they're going to fund homelessness programs, which could create a $40 million budget shortfall for the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. So, Erica, I know you've been following this closely. You've written about it for PubliCola. Can you tell us about what those changes are?
Well, the biggest change is that the federal government now wants to pay not for permanent housing, which has been the main focus of these particular grants, but for more temporary stuff like transitional housing. The idea being that people who are chronically homeless, have perhaps lifelong addictions, mental illness, will be able to go into transitional housing. And remember, we're describing the Trump administration here, so I should just preface by saying this is like completely, totally unrealistic. But the idea is that they'll just put people into transitional housing, and within a very rapid period of time, they will be cured of whatever ails them, such as drug addiction or mental illness, and will be able to move on out of homelessness and into basically market rate or affordable housing. And so this totally upends the entire homelessness system nationally. In Seattle, it's most of the money that from this grant has traditionally gone to permanent housing and permanent supportive housing. So we're talking about like more than 90% of the money is at risk. And so King County and the city of Seattle are trying to figure out ways to sort of swap out the money or figure out reserve funds, things like that, to supplant some of it and to be able to keep paying for some of this. But it is potentially very devastating. The estimates are up to 4,500 people who are currently housed could become homeless because of these cuts.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we could just wave a magic wand and have people be cured of anything that ails them in transitional housing? But I do want to talk a little bit about what permanent supportive housing is and how that is defined, versus transitional housing, just in case people are not familiar with these concepts and why it matters that we're now trying to avoid funding permanent supportive housing.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different categories in the homelessness system, and it can be pretty confusing. Permanent housing, just to back up for 1 second, is just any permanent housing. So it's housing that you can be in and you're not expected to have to leave after any period of time, which is what transitional housing is, that you're expected to leave after a year or two. Permanent supportive housing, which is a big category of what we fund here in Seattle, is housing that has supports, basically behavioral health supports for people who need more intensive case management and behavioral health care, and who, are not expected to transition out of that housing at any point. So it's for people, who have disabling conditions that are behavioral health related. And DESC, the Downtown Emergency Service Center, is one of the biggest providers of this type of housing in Seattle. And they're probably the group that stands to lose the most under these cuts if the city and county don't figure out a way to backfill that funding. But yeah, it's a very specialized kind of housing for a very, a subset of people who are very vulnerable and high need. And probably the people that you think of when you think of people who are chronically homeless on the streets. And of course, the Trump administration is minimizing their emphasis on this because they want to do things like work requirements and, means testing and all this stuff that the administration is imposing, across the board on other programs. But it's potentially very devastating.
Erica, you talked about in your article that there's sort of a range of ways that this funding could be moved around in order to fill some of the need. It sounded like it would require nonprofits who are typically getting funding from the state or city to apply at a federal level, and the organizations that are typically getting federal funding to then take money from the city or the state. Can you explain that a little bit and what that might look like for folks?
Yeah, I mean, you explained it very well. Basically, it would be a fund swap. The idea is that, a nonprofit that does, let's say, outreach to homeless encampments, which now gets funding from the local city and state governments, would go apply for this money and hopefully get it. And that the DESCs of the world would be able to get money from the city. Now, that sounds very simple, but it is actually incredibly risky because if the Trump administration, they have all kinds of other reasons that they will probably devalue Seattle's applications. And so if, let's say, an organization like REACH, which does homeless outreach, applies for federal funding, doesn't get it, well, they don't have any money anymore because the city has spent that on permanent supportive housing programs. That's one scenario, but I would call that a fairly likely scenario that the Trump administration would not want to fully fund a lot of our programs. One thing that I write about in my article is that HUD under Trump is also imposing all kinds of requirements on so-called gender ideology. You can't acknowledge in your applications or in your programs that trans people exist. So that is one really big barrier, obviously, to nonprofits in our area and around the country. There's also demerits if you have ever used any kind of quote unquote racial preferences when allocating funds through a program. And of course, there's immigration rules that are also contained. You get points if you ask for people's immigration status. The idea being, of course, that then if they are not in the country legally, that you would presumably facilitate some sort of deportation or ICE action. And so, none of our local nonprofits basically do stuff like that. And so we're not going to be very high on the list nationally because, there are nonprofits that provide homeless services in rural areas that, maybe do comply more with those really restrictive new requirements. And so we're going to be less competitive than we have been, on top of the fact that this is just upending the entire system with just a couple months for everybody to get their ducks in a row and get these applications in.
Yeah, weren't they supposed to have announced the funding structure in the summer? And they've been delaying. And so that just gives all of these organizations even less time to try and plan for this. But so I saw that Seattle City Council member Alexis Mercedes Rink and also King County Council member Teresa Mosqueda have proposed amendments to fill that gap. So I think there's going to be, $21 million here from the city of Seattle, and then potentially $36 million from the county that would go towards both Seattle and the larger county. That sounds like a lot of money, but is that enough potentially to backfill?
Yeah, it's $36 million potentially total. That is the amount that is projected to be a shortfall. It's very unlikely to be enough. And of course, the need for funding for homelessness is only going to get more severe as other federal cuts take place. The social safety net that holds America together is getting frayed and torn apart. So, I mean, we're going to have more homelessness in this country. And so the need is only going to become greater. So, yeah, I mean, $36 million, I think it's being seen as a start. There will need to be state money. There will perhaps need to be more progressive taxes. And it is a drop in the bucket, but it is, for once, Seattle is kind of out ahead on this and really started talking about taking action early. And the fact that, this is coming together right now in November before these grants get announced is a good thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that the Harrell administration just put $30 million towards an encampment sweeping unified care team council. And I know this week, City Council passed Rob Saka's amendment that does not allow any money earmarked for that to be put towards any other purpose. Specifically, I mean, this one, right? I guess I'm curious if you think things could look different under the Wilson administration. I know she has said that she could not commit to doing no sweeps and that has been a point of contention in some circles. But is there any chance that she could come in and undo some of this or try and free up some of that money to go towards these other programs?
Oh, yeah, I think absolutely. We actually just had her on Seattle Nice this week, our podcast, and she talked about, wanting to reverse a lot of these policies. And one thing about that $30 million, I mean, a couple things could happen with it. The Seattle City Council, which is getting 2 new progressive members, Eddie Lynn and Deanne Foster, could decide to lift that requirement, which only goes for a year. So she's constrained for the next year to fund the unified care team. The other possibility is she could say, you know what, that's fine. We'll keep the unified care team, but they're going to do something different now. And I think she really wants to figure out a way to spend that money on more, productive purposes. So I think we will see a big difference under the Wilson administration.
I'm thinking about sort of the larger picture that all of this is taking place in. You mentioned, the particular groups that are most at risk from these funding changes. The fact that Seattle is a safer city for trans folks to move to, the fact that we're a sanctuary city, supposedly immigrants and folks who are undocumented might be safer here. These policy funding cuts are making it so that there's less support for the folks that are coming here to receive that support. But then in addition to that, KCRHA already has kind of its own scandal going on. And I'm curious to sort of hear from you about how you think some of the complaints and internal work structure is playing out in this moment where funding is also at risk.
And didn't they just have layoffs?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the scandal you're referring to is that there were a number of complaints about the CEO, Kelly Kennison, and there was a report that came out. I requested that report. They've denied my request about, did she do any of the things? I mean, the allegations were basically about racial discrimination. She wanted to hire a couple of white men that a lot of people objected to because they were executive level positions and there's not a lot of money. And there was the sense that there were Black candidates and candidates of color who would have been able to fill those roles within the agency. And then just general toxic workplace environment stuff. So we don't know what the report said after there was an investigation into this because they're keeping it secret for now. But out of the wake of that, they made a lot of layoffs. And so the agency is shrinking and is very unstable. I don't know a lot of people who think that it is long for this world at this point. It doesn't feel like a font of stability right now at a time when, we really need some stability in the homelessness system.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see what Katie Wilson does. I mean, Bruce Harrell was kind of clawing back a lot of the services that used to be under the KCRHA and putting them in the city and kind of taking control of things back to the city's Human Services Department. I think a lot of that is up in the air for Katie Wilson to to kind of decide where she wants to go with that.
Well, speaking of things being up in the air, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about some big changes to local government potentially. Oh, hey, sorry, just having my afternoon snack. Lately, I've been really into Cobb's popcorn. It's small batch, handcrafted, premium quality, fancy pants popcorn. Like, their kitchen only produces 60 gallons a day, and it's popped fresh daily. So when it's gone, it's gone. The flavors are really good. They've got kettle corn, vanilla salted caramel, and brown butter from family recipes. It's made in Seattle, and locals and visitors alike will love it. I had a friend visiting from out of town, and she raved about how good it was. It's probably because they use real butter. Stop by their shop at Pike Place if you need your popcorn fix, a gift for a friend, or snacks for an event. Plus, they're right here in Seattle. You can go visit their shop at Pike Place if you need your popcorn fix, or if you need a gift for a friend or snacks for an event. They'll even give you a discount if you show them your Washington ID. Go visit the Cobb's Popcorn Shop at 1500 Western Ave near the market. Go pop in soon. CityCast Seattle is made possible by AT&T. America's first network is also its fastest and most reliable. Based on RootMetrics' United States Root Score Report, 1H 2025. Tested with best commercially available smartphones on 3 national mobile networks across all available network types. Your experiences may vary. RootMetrics rankings are not an endorsement of AT&T. When you compare, there's no comparison. AT&T. With a new mayor, new city council members, and a new county executive, it looks like we're about to see some big changes in local government. And this week, it sounds like Girmay Zahalai's incoming administration is potentially planning for a round of layoffs. And we haven't had an administration change since Dow Constantine took office in 2009. What have you heard about this, Erica?
So what Zahalai has announced, he told staff on Friday of last week that he's going to be laying off about 100 people and allowing some to reapply for their jobs, which obviously is not great for morale. People are freaking out. They feel insulted because a lot of people have been there for a really long time. Dow Constantine was a remarkably stable executive. So if you're talking about people who've been there for 10, 12 years, yeah, I mean, they are angry and upset in some cases about the prospect of losing their jobs. I mean, if you look at like the way that the city of Seattle does this, we elect a new mayor every 4 years, basically. Maybe Katie Wilson will break that streak, but we have elected a new mayor every 4 years since 2009. And that whole team turns over every 4 years or every time there's a new mayor. And that is basically what's happening. At least that is what Girmay Zahalai's team
says.
It's
pretty typical,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So 100 people, it's a lot. And I'm not sure exactly who all those 100 people are. It's not just people who literally work in the executive's office. I think there's going to be some turnover of department heads, and that's going to be disruptive, as it should be, because it's a new administration. The counterfactual there is like what he keeps Dow Constantine's entire team. I mean, I am very sympathetic to people who are facing the prospect of losing their jobs right now in this job market and economy. But it is also the case that they worked for Dow and they knew back when he announced that he was resigning and leaving for Sound Transit. I mean, they knew he was going away, and whoever got elected would want to bring in their own team. So I don't want to sound unsympathetic, because I would certainly, if I was in the shoes of those folks, I would be personally panicking a little bit, just because, I have
15 years of stable employment is hard to come by these days.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fired from one job, well, not counting when I was 15, and it was like devastating to me. So I totally get it.
Wait, Erica, what job were you fired from at 15?
Oh my God, I worked at this place called Gift Baskets, etc.
Incredible name.
I think that, I can't remember. I think I had trouble counting back money and doing the sort of jobby things that you're supposed to do at a retail job. I got better. But
I was like, you're 15, you know?
Yeah, no, by the time I was 16, I had it down. But yeah, I got fired from that job after about 2 weeks.
Wow. They didn't give you much time at all to learn. That's fast.
They didn't last very long either. So,
Okay. Yeah.
maybe they should have given me a shot.
Gift baskets, etc. is truly an incredible name also.
Very, very 90s.
Well, okay. So going back to Seattle city news, outgoing city council member Sarah Nelson is introducing this bill that would restrict political consultants' access to City Hall. It would ban people from working on a campaign and being paid by the city for services at the same time, and would require a year-long gap between those things. So the Seattle Times reports that this was spurred by Mayor Harrell's arrangement with an advisor who was also the campaign consultant for Dion Foster, who just took Nelson's seat on the council. And so Harrell and his advisor, Christian Sinderman, say that there's nothing unethical about their work arrangement. Nelson is just airing political grievances. And Nelson says if this were about personal vendettas, she would have brought this up way sooner. Which, to be fair, I mean, she could have brought this up during campaign season, and it seems like she did not. I am curious to hear from you all what you all make of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, two things could be true, right? It could be a personal vendetta. I mean, Sarah Nelson did not get along with Bruce Harrell either. And it could also be a really good idea. I don't think that it is great that Kristen Sinderman had an office in City Hall and was a consultant to the city, essentially, while he was also working on Bruce Harrell's campaign. And so this seems like really basic stuff and pretty obvious. I think if it wasn't coming from Sarah Nelson, progressives would all be applauding it. It is a little last minute, but it's a good idea. I mean, we shouldn't have these kinds of conflicts of interest going on at City Hall, and they've kind of existed forever. It's not just Christian Sinderman who's been sort of embedded at City Hall. So I don't feel too badly for consultants not being able to kind of double dip that way. I mean, even if it's not corruption, it has the whiff of corruption.
It feels similar to me to the things that have been playing out around the attempt Sarah Nelson made to build additional affordable housing near the port, where, people were like really kind of angry about that bill for a variety of reasons. But it did feel like to some degree it was because it was Sarah Nelson that had introduced it that people were sort of against it, even though the idea of having additional affordable housing is a good one. But then it turned out, of course, that, the necessary studies to determine whether this was actually something that could be built were not done. So, yeah, it feels like interesting to sort of see on her way out the door what Sarah Nelson is trying to do with her last little bit of time in city council, and then sort of how the response to that is dividing along political lines within the city.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't typically align with Nelson on a lot of things politically, but this felt like one of those things where you're like, that's a good point, actually. I don't know that we should be so quick to dismiss it.
It feels like common sense.
Although, one of my questions about this, though, is that 1 year gap in between getting money from the city and being a consultant. I don't know. Is that 1 year gap reasonable, or is that going to take a lot of people out of the game?
Well, it's a 1 year gap that goes, from working for the city and then or consulting for the city and then being a political consultant, and not the other way around. I mean, I don't know. We have these kind of like cooling off periods or waiting periods for other things too. When you are a city council member, or not a city council member, when you're a city employee, there are requirements about political work after you leave. So it's not that unusual.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about that idea of Seattle and what Seattle nice really means. So, Erica, your podcast is called Seattle Nice, and I really love that title, but I want to hear from you how you define Seattle nice. Like, is it just passive aggression, or is it something else?
Oh my God. It's all of the above. It's passive aggression. It's like making plans and then canceling them, or pretending you're going to make plans and not making plans. It's,
we should do something sometime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should totally get coffee soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also, politically, it's people sort of talking past each other and not saying the thing that they mean, which drives me crazy as a transplant from outside of Seattle. I mean, I've been here for a really long time, but it's just a lack of directness. And so we call the podcast that, it just to kind of, in a very sort of sarcastic or ironic way. David Hyde, our one of my two co-moderators, the other is Sandeep Kaushik. He's the one that came up with the name, and we immediately loved it because we are very direct, and we say what we mean, and in a way that I hope is kind of refreshing for people who are used to the Seattle nice way of talking around everything and avoiding conflict.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that comes to mind for me whenever I think about Seattle nice is when you get to a 4-way, 5-way, 6-way intersection where there's that many stop signs.
No, you go.
Exactly. And you're like, can somebody just make up their mind and go? Because this, like, I'm tapping the brake, I'm tapping the gas for good 5 minutes. Drives me crazy.
I'm a very aggressive driver too, because I learned to drive in Houston, and I don't know if you've never driven in Houston. It's kind of like LA, but a little bit like more of a death wish. And so, so that is such a perfect example. But yeah, that's basically the concept of the podcast. We are very much not Seattle nice, and we get into some pretty heated arguments, I would say, about things because we do not all agree.
Yeah, and that's what I appreciate about that podcast is that you all do not agree all the time, but you do so respectfully. But you all come armed with facts, and you're willing to hash it out on the pod. This also gets me thinking, so, for a long time you wrote The C is for Crank. Now you've got PubliCola. In this current ecosystem, this information ecosystem, what do you all see as the role of independent journalism?
As an independent journalist myself, I think that most of the people I kind of rely on for information, especially in areas, outside my area of expertise, are independent journalists. If you look at like Seattle Bike Blog or The Urbanist we mentioned before, or Capitol Hill Seattle Blog, or like all kinds of these local small outlets, we are providing a service that used to be, maybe provided more by the mainstream media and, the alternative weeklies. We used to have 2 alt weeklies. I worked for both of them. The Seattle Times, they report on local issues. They have a couple of good local reporters, but it's definitely not the kind of coverage that you saw even like 10 years ago. And for my part, at PubliCola, I cover a lot of stuff that I think just absolutely would not get covered otherwise, whether it's sort of internal city stuff that is complex to cover or that requires just talking to a lot of anonymous sources over a long period of time, or whether it's process stories about how things come to pass and not just the outcome of decisions. I think that the mainstream media has just kind of failed to cover that stuff and is impoverished now. So I think it's such a key role of, particularly in Seattle. We have a lot of independent outlets here. It's really important to get a full picture of what's going on in the city.
Yeah, I think a lot about the internal decisions that bigger media outlets will make about what their style guide is, how things are phrased, what perspective is represented in sourcing, or even what a journalist is allowed to write in their piece. And I think with independent journalists, those decisions are obviously being made on a much smaller scale. And so as a reader, you have a really clear sense of where those decisions are coming from and what perspective that journalist is representing. And I think as we enter this era of more sort of personality-based platforms, it's increasingly important to really understand the perspective of the outlet or the platform that you're receiving information from. And I think independent journalists do a really good job of riding that line between, being transparent, being factual, being rigorous, but also showing that objectivity in the traditional sort of two-side sense isn't a real thing. And we need to be sort of more critical consumers of news.
I do think we're moving away from that. Even with more mainstream outlets, I think there's just been a lot of public discussion about how everyone has a perspective. It is a matter of being honest and fair rather than trying to remain objective and, cover all sides at once, because it's impossible for one person to represent all of that. Erica, I know people are coming to you with tips about changes to these administrations that are coming up. How do you think about building trust with sources over time? Because clearly you've done that.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you say about being fair, but not necessarily objective. I think people know where I'm coming from, but also know that I don't misquote people. I don't burn sources. I follow all the basic rules of journalism. And if I have an opinion about something, I let somebody else say it. Or if I have a very strong opinion about something, I let the facts sort of demonstrate that case. But I do try to talk to all sides. I don't sort of say like, oh, well, I don't agree with this perspective, so I'm not going to talk to this person. You will never see me like write a piece about a politician that I don't, particularly agree with without trying to, reach out to them if the story is about them. So, and I think that has built trust over time. And I think it's also like given me access to perspectives that maybe are not my own, but people are like, well, she's not going to completely misrepresent me, so it's better to talk to her than not to talk to her. No, that's not always true. I mean, Bruce Harrell did not talk to me except at press conferences, but I try.
As you're talking about access, you said like Harrell wouldn't talk to you. I know you just said Wilson was on your podcast recently. Do you feel like that signals a potential change with this upcoming administration and how much they might be talking to media, especially independent media?
Oh my God. I mean, I think that Katie Wilson is just a completely different person and has a different perspective on that than Bruce Harrell. I mean, so I think it's going to change a lot. And we've had administrations before that have given a lot of access to all kinds of media. I'm thinking of Mike McGinn. He would have like these roundtables all the time that were not about any particular purpose, just where he would invite in everybody from any kind of media that existed at the time to talk to him and ask him questions. I'm hopeful that we'll see more of that. And I think that Katie Wilson has been very media savvy and has been willing to talk to lots of non-traditional outlets. So I think things will probably improve because it won't be as, hopefully transactional as Harold treated the media. I don't think he liked talking to not just me, but, the media in general, if they weren't, willing to be sort of fawning about him, or promote his ideas in some way.
Katie Wilson, come on the pod. Katie Wilson, we want to talk to you.
She's been busy being on like CNN and she talked to Crystal Ball. I mean, yeah, she's doing a lot of national press right now, but I expect that'll probably die down somewhat and she'll be more accessible locally.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can only imagine what a whirlwind it probably is on that end.
Yeah, especially with Trump, talking about her on a national level as well right now.
God.
Yeah.
What a gift.
All right. Well, that's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. I'm your host, Jane Sihu. Erica C. Barnett, thank you so much for joining us. For people who aren't already familiar with your work, where can they find more of it?
PubliCola.com, or I am Erica C. Barnett, Erica with the C, Barnett, on all social media platforms, except TikTok. I'm not there yet. We'll see if I ever get there.
Join us on the dark side, Erica. All right. Sam J. Leeds, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Jane. And Erica, we will probably be putting you on TikTok in that clips from this interview will be there. So
love that. Love that. I just cannot get on yet another platform.
Yeah, don't worry. We got you.
Fair. Listeners, we want to hear from you. Send us your news tips, your questions, your hot goss, or your thoughts about what Seattle nice is by sending an email to seattle@citycast.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail on the CityCast hotline at 206-880-3931. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. Or even better, leave us a review. You can get more local news and events delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter. Just go to seattle.citycast.fm. Until next time, see ya, Seattle.